Hey, welcome to another episode of Subscription Radio. Today I have a very special guest, my friend Eric. Um, Eric's the co-founder of SweatPants Agency, digital marketing agency, and the only agency with two Inc. number one fastest growing companies in their categories. And that's from scratch, right? So zero to fastest. Eric spent over $300 million in advertising, has an enormous, I'd say, experience in what does and does not work. And if you follow any of his tweet or Twitter threads, he's been dropping a lot of, I think really, really interesting and thought provoking threads around marketing and experimentation and thinking, we'll call it thinking normal and thinking sort of, out of the box. So really excited to have you on here, Eric. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to how I just described you.
No, I think that's lovely, Matt. And thank
Awesome.
you very much for having.
Hell yeah. And, a lot of the brands you work with, since this is subscription radio, a lot of the brands you've worked with are subscription e-commerce brands. And so part of what I'm excited and interested to hear from you is, in what sort of your day to day and speaking with a lot of these brands who are like have hit their stride with growth, what are you seeing working or not working now that was working, 6 or 9 months ago? And so what are some of the common themes and ways that you've approached breaking through growth plateaus?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of challenges, right? Like, I think everybody knows that. Actually, there's no challenges. Super easy and no problem. Right.
Uh-huh.
But like, if we really look at it, like, there's a lot of challenges that hit e-commerce across the board now, right? So there was an increase in shipping costs. There was an increase in input costs. Then we saw a bunch of challenges with paid media, right? So the challenges in paid media were multifold. First of all, there was this point kind of after COVID where some of the demand went down, but the prices of inventory was still way up, right? So all these big brands were still competing there. And what we've seen actually in this first quarter of this year is actually we've seen the CPMs go down. Has the intent going up? I'm not sure that I can really say that. I think it's basically flat, still a little tenuous, if you will. But people are winning right now because the inventory cost is low. So I think what we're seeing is we're seeing a bunch of like big brands, like, the Amazons, the Walmarts, all these people, the world actually pulling out paid media. And it's opening up a lot of opportunity on the paid media side. The other thing on the paid media side that's been like a big challenge for people is finding a source of truth, right? So post iOS, a bunch of people had to go and like figure out, what their data was. Like Facebook, mostly underreported afterwards. Sometimes it overreported, but no matter what, it was a complete lie, right? So like we have this example where we were running UTM last click and we saw transactions in Google Analytics, and then we saw the transactions inside of Facebook. Same number of transactions, but when we looked at the ads and the ad sets, they were completely different. So it's super important these days to find a source of truth. The way that we find sources of truth most of the time is we're using things like North Beam, Triple Whale, or UTM last click. In terms of subscription, there's challenges in the subscription industry too. I think we've seen quite a few brands in subscription recently run into some. So I think Bird Box has fallen into that category. But I think it's very much about the types of category and the way that you treat subscription, right? So like one of the things that I think a lot of people get mistaken about, and this is true with D2C, it's true with subscription, is they actually think it's a business, right? It's a business model. And the truth is it's not a business model. D2C is a channel and subscription is revenue, right? It's a terrific revenue model. It's a revenue model that, makes me very happy. Everybody likes waking up and knowing how much money they have at the beginning of the month, right? Everybody likes not having to pay for those customers again and again. But too many people looked at it as an actual business. So what we saw kind of in, 2016 to 2018 is we saw a bunch of people like create these subscription boxes that were just stuff in a box. That is losing efficacy almost every day, right? What is winning in the subscription industry are a few things. Companies that have consumables and can add subscription to it. Companies that, as a subscription business, actually offer an experience, or companies that Yes, they might be stuff in the box, but they figured out ways to tap into experience as well as community. Truth is like people, most of the time when we survey people about like subscription, they're really interested in essentially the experience, right? Like a lot of people, like even stuff like Geek Fuel, people would want to sit down with like their daughter, pick out their favorite items, and put it on the little girl's shelf, put it on his shelf, and you put these out, and it's an experience. Bokusu. You open up Bokusu box, which is these Japanese snacks. First of all, the box is amazing. When you open it up, it actually like rips a little bit of air before you lift it off, almost like your iPhone. And they have this full like guide, shows you all the different food. It shows you all the different kind of people that are making it and takes you on the that's an experience. So we're seeing a lot of that change. And then the final thing, honestly, is that we are seeing an increase in churn, but there's ways that we're actually mitigating that and mitigating a big way right now.
Awesome. No, thanks for the sort of the overview of that. And I think it's funny because going back to some of the brands I know you've worked with, like BattleBox was another big one. And I'm curious. So I guess one of the first questions is like, do you personally have any subscriptions? Which feels like the natural question. Yeah.
I mean, of course, I think everybody right now has some type of subscription, whether it's streaming media or whatever. But yes,
I guess I'm thinking specifically e-commerce subscriptions.
Sure. I have a subscription to Supercat.
Gotcha. Yeah. You'd be surprised how many times I've had people on the show who, they're growth marketers and like you ask them and no one has subscriptions. And I always ask my friends too. And it's fascinating to see who does and who doesn't. But ultimately someone remembers like halfway through the conversation, oh wait, I do have this random thing. But
what about you?
I had a meal subscription for a long time where they would actually like crunch the macros based off of fitness goals. And they would use Grubhub's API to deliver food that matches exactly how much I needed to consume based off of my latest like weekly weigh-in. So that was cool because it was basically like they would pick you would tell them your preference, like food preferences, and then they would use that as sort of a basis of picking a meal, and it would just show up wherever you were. And if you were like out of town, you just give them your current address and they'd find something near there. So yeah. And beyond that, these days I've cut down on a lot of subscription. I actually had this experience a week ago where a family size of paper towels showed up from Amazon, and I already had like 6 paper towels. And so I kid you not, I had no more shelf space. So I now have paper towels in my freezer. I'm a family, and I'm like, I don't know how long it's going to take for me to go through them, but I would actually say that's one of like the biggest problems I've experienced with subscription. And in talking to people is like I hate the idea of wasting money and just being surprised. And so I immediately canceled that subscription. So like now I have a year's worth of paper towels.
It's a problem. And candidly, like going to the stuff in the box ones. That's one of the biggest challenges that they have. It's too much of something, right? Like there's all these sock and fashion one. Like how many socks do you really need? And so like, yeah, I might want to go ahead and order a sock after I subscribe for a while and can do that experience. But like, I'm not going to want, a new like 3 pairs of unique socks every single, right? So there's a bit of a challenge there. And I do think like some of the strategies, and I think you're actually doing some of these strategies right now, where you have the ability to subscribe, but also like you can change some intervals. You can go ahead and actually order ahead. It actually increases. It's not just that it's a good customer experience. It actually is, right? Because that's what the consumer ultimately wants.
Yeah. And I'll say like part of what we've pushed with brands is creating like a membership experience. Like I've always said that there's a great book on this. And so none of this is unique to me. These are all things I've picked up from people who've been studying subscriptions and membership. Like there's a book called The Membership Economy that was really eye-opening by someone named Robin, I think Waxman. That informed a lot of the way I even look at the category is like, as you said, subscriptions are a revenue model. And
Mhm.
if you were to break down, like, what is it that people want? They don't want a subscription per se. What they want is the product when they need it. It's like, you want one less thing to worry about. Like, I don't want to be thinking about, like, if I could have it on autopilot and have it show up magically
Mhm.
when I need it, that sounds freaking awesome.
Right.
But like with consumable products where like consumption habits vary and like maybe you're out of town, like it doesn't happen. Um, and so I think, yeah, the membership piece to me, like finding ways, like Jot, one of the brands we work with, they have it where they do like small batches of artisanal coffee that they
Mhm.
just do it once and it'll last for like a month. And then, but you have to be a subscriber in order to even buy it. So they've made
Gotcha.
some sort of exclusivity into like their catalog.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, that's the closest, certainly within like the D2C world that I've seen around consumables.
Yep.
Um, I don't know. What are some good examples you've seen around how to make it into more of an experience? Like, I mean, you gave an example earlier, I guess, around like the unboxing.
Yeah. I mean, the
Yeah.
unboxing is definitely an example. I mean, the experience, like if you look at Honey Killer has always been an experience, right? So Honey Killer, for anybody that doesn't know, is a
Yeah.
mystery subscription box. Um, might have grew a little fast. Who knows?
I
But
was like, well, that's one of your number one ink fastest.
right. And so like with Honey Killer, I mean, it's this experience where you can sit down with your friends, you're trying to figure out these clues, you're doing these ciphers, and it's an experience that could be a date night. It's an experience that could be a game, right?
Hmm.
Like those things are actual experiences. One of mutual friends, a guy that used CTO or he was sheep product officer on a kill. He runs a company called Completing the Puzzle, right?
Hmm.
And so it's these rentable puzzles, and you don't have to
Yeah.
fill up the closet space. You get something unique and it's a surprise every time you get it, but like you're sitting down, you're playing with the family. That's the type of stuff that people really want to pay for a lot of times as an
Mm.
experience. Now, on the consumable side, I think you're 100%. I want it when I need it, but I will tell you, like, one of the things that I really liked about Supergut is when I signed up, they kept sending me kind of these SMS each day. Did you take your super?
Right.
Did you
Yeah.
take your Supergut today? So it's almost like they're trying to get you on an adherence.
Hmm.
And if you think about things like atomic habits, or you just think
Yeah.
about like doing small things and getting in the habit of it, I mean, trying to train that behavior up front, I don't know what it's done to the retention compared to the actual numbers, but like, I gotta tell you, I thought it was pretty freaking cool.
Right. You're just saying anecdotally from like an experience perspective, you're like, I see how this could work. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, that was actually, even when I've thought about ways to try to more predictably, like, how could you predict when someone needs more product? One way would be checking in with them and be like, how much do you have left? Or asking them on
Mhm.
some sort of, I mean, like coffee would be, I mean, if with something where you can take it every day or like a supplement, it's easy because like, oh yeah, did you take it today? Whereas if you're asking about coffee, it's like, it becomes a bit of a, how do you make it relevant and not annoying?
Yep.
In my mind, it's largely comes down to the communication style. But that to me is like one way where it's like, it doesn't take AI to figure this out. It can be
No.
like just design, like designing a good experience uh, where the person doesn't have to think too hard. And then you can kind of get a sense of, all right, their inventory is getting low. Now we should ship them
Mhm.
more or ask them if they're ready. I'm curious, is that something, how would you approach that? And am I crazy?
So, which part?
Well, I guess like with a consumable product, we're not one where you
Mhm.
take every day.
Mhm.
Like, I think if the primary reason that most people cancel a subscription is because they get unwanted product, it would seem
Mhm.
to me that being able to forecast when each person needs more would be possibly one of the best, like a great retention mechanism.
So I think there's a lot of things done in it. I think actually a decent amount of it's done up front. I think the second half of that is probably more like, what you guys do with your subscription solution. But like candidly, up front, you can give recommendations, right? So like,
Hmm.
here's the intervals based on your consumption. So like,
Right.
are you do you drink a pot of coffee a day? Do you drink,
Right.
you know, um, do you drink a cup of coffee a day? Do you drink, just a couple cups a week, right? And here's some recommended intervals. In addition to that, I think expectation setting up front and indoctrination can actually increase consumption and also help. I don't know the exact way that I do it in coffee, but like, you can do all the comparisons. You talk about how faster it is, how many minutes you save, how does this clean your coffee and all these things, how, you're going to feel better caffeinated high after like, the first cup. And when you continue to do this, you're going to be, by month 2, you've saved over X number of minutes and preparing it. By month,
Hmm.
you've saved X number of minutes preparing it. And so like with Supergut, when they sent it to me, they did a lot of future pacing. So like with the future pacing, they were like, oh, well, in week 1, you're going to notice these things. Week 2, you're going to notice this. By like month 2, you're going to be in this situation where you have less bloating, your digestive system's better, and all this other stuff. And I think the future pacing and indoctrination is kind of probably overlooked by a lot of people because they're like, hey, they just ordered some product. Let me send it. And the truth is, no. Like if I hire a new employee, I'm putting them through some onboarding
Hmm.
and they're going to know our core values, they're gonna know what our expectations are. They're going to know everything, but we don't really do any of that, right? Like too many people just send it out. That's not like, if you want people to come back, give them a reason to come back because you set the expectation.
Yeah. Interesting. That makes sense. What were some of those, we'll call it, going back to churn
Mhm.
reduction? There were a couple of things that you were referencing earlier, and it might be what you and I were talking about before the show, is like, what are some of these strategies that you've implemented given that churn has increased, whether we contributed that
Mhm.
to the economy, whatnot? Like, what are some of the things that you've seen work?
Yeah. I mean, um, to address the churn real quickly,
Yeah.
I see it going up, but it's also hard to tell because every time after the holidays, you're going to see an increase in churn because people will just impulsive. There's gifts. There's going to be all these things that are going to cause people to churn at a higher rate than your main cohorts, right? But the thing that we've seen kind of decrease churn more than anything else, right? Like obviously there's things on involuntary churn and dunning and all these other things that many people know. But what we've been doing is a lot of insight upsell, right? So what that
Hmm.
means is, let's say that you get a box from Honeycomb and you make it all the way through that industry. Well, let's say like day 7, day 14 after you get it, somewhere around there, we hit you up and we say, hey, you know what? So excited that you got the murder mystery. If you're like most people, you've already made it through it and you can't wait for your next box. Good news. Click here now and get your next one. Literally, they go to a page, they confirm all their information. Next thing you can do is you can say, great to an annual, and it's just like getting this thing, right? So the
Hmm.
discount on that's pretty nominal. It's 112, obviously.
Hmm.
And you got somebody that's already saying, hey, I really want this, and I already
Yeah.
committed to this, and they're doing that. We have another beauty brand, very clean beauty type brand. And what we're doing is we're actually sending a message about, hey, upgrade to like a 6-month and you save 10% on your subscription and you get a free bottle of this. Right.
Hmm.
And the scary thing about this, by the way, and I'm hoping this is on your roadmap if it's not already there, but like we do a lot of this manually in the back end
Right.
because, um, but it's worth it because once we get somebody to a higher cohort, we're going to have higher retention with them overall, right? And that's going to be
Hmm.
most subscriptions. Don't get me wrong. Like there's some subscriptions that, prepaid plans, you might consider doing more towards your cliffs rather than doing it early on. So like we have some subscription brands that are more necessities and those necessities, they might go to an average cohort like 16, 17 months on average, right? In those cases, you might not send these types of offers until you start to see the first cliff beyond the first month or two, right? Because you're going to get churn. But like, there's so many opportunities to get these people on these prepaid plans. And I can tell you almost everybody that we deploy this on, and mostly this being deployed through email strategy, everybody that we're deploying this on has seen their lowest churn months since. And
Hmm.
by the way, like you can do this in a freaking insert, right? Like
Hmm.
your one-time purchasers, sell them a subscription. Your monthly subscriptions, sell them something longer term. Throw in an insert. What does it cost? 40 cents. Maybe if you've heard a really bad fulfillment facility, maybe they'll charge you a buck or two on top of that. But like it doesn't cost much. Hit them wallet, right? Like
Hmm.
your emotion's high when you buy. If the experience is good, your emotion will be. but people get bored after 2, 3 months, right? So
Right.
don't let that set in. Hit them.
And I'm curious, so when you're doing the upgrade, is it that so they've already gotten their first month. So are you extending it another 12 months or are you extending it 11 months?
So in most of these cases, it'd be a full like 12 month, right? So
Right.
what it would be is, let's say that you got your first month and then you want to go ahead and get your next box for free. You get that next one for free, but then there's 11 payments essentially, right?
Right.
Or 11 months that are paid.
Yep.
That's the way that we're going. So for the most part, cancel the monthly, move up to a prepaid plan. And I'm telling you, man, this works beautifully. And by the way, cash flow wise, come.
Yep.
Who doesn't like cash?
And are you doing this both through email as well as SMS? And are you leaning on one channel versus the other more?
So we are mostly doing it through email right now, but I'm glad that you said that because I'm about to go tell our team to go test some SMS.
And Flo, please report back on how that's going.
I will.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because I think, I think the challenge with a lot of, at least what I've seen with some of these workflows is, because like functionally we do support what you just talked about and we've implemented it at the post-purchase experience level, like right after someone has purchased. I love your suggestion.
By the way, that's amazing.
Well, but I love your suggestion.
A lot of platforms out there don't do this. You guys are definitely leading edge here.
Well, and I think you and I first met when I was doing Cart Hook, and so like everything around like post purchase and like cross selling and upselling, just observing how brands have done it, and like most of the D2C operators who I talk to, who I hate saying killing it, they really rely on upsells and whatnot to try to get basically to cover their cost of acquisition, ideally the day that they acquire a customer, right? Like this goes back to the whole value of being able to get the cash up front is that then you can reinvest that into growth. So where I was going with this was that part of the challenge is making it turnkey, because let's say someone's using Klaviyo as their ESP. We don't want to replace Klaviyo, and we've been very clear on like, all right, we'll integrate with whatever like ESP you're using, and on Shopify it's typically Klaviyo, but then we have to like manually go. We can't just like dynamically insert templates or flows into your account. I wish we could, because then instead what happens is we have to go and replicate like the upcoming order reminder flow.
Right.
The alternative is for us to send that stuff automatically ourselves, but that's not the business till now, that we haven't wanted to go into that, because we're like, you're already using, you want to be able to do split testing, you want to do A/B testing, unless we're going to build out a full out Klaviyo replacement, you're not going to be able to do any of that stuff. So we're better off solving the problem for you in Klaviyo. But I think the question comes down to is how do you make it as easy as possible for a brand to take even that strategy and then implement it themselves without it being like, because whenever you require someone to do work, you're going to have a lot of friction. I wish we could do it out of the box and not just say, hey, copy this and do this and this.
I mean, I think I'm happy to jail with you about it later, but I honestly think that it could be fairly simple, right? Like, the main thing that's the challenge here is like, we have to almost make it a customer support ticket, or we need to go ahead and have people reply to it. That's what it means, manually do something
to do it. Yeah.
Then they reply. That the truth is that imagine that you have the opportunity to essentially come up with unique URLs for each one of these people, right? And these unique URLs basically land on their plan, right? The pages are already kind of redesigned based, they're templatized. I mean, that'd be very doable, right? You're basically going on some session data. You could pass those variables probably to Klaviyo, or you could go ahead and do like a transactional email, or even better yet, take that data, be able to upload that data to whatever you're doing in terms of insert postcard, make it a QR code. Code, I scan it, I immediately get, X% off my next thing. I upgrade the plan. It's all said and done. So I think there's a way to do it. Um, and I think there's a slick way. Candidly, I have a feeling you're going to be the first.
Yeah. Well, let's figure this out, man. Because I think
Yeah.
anything, because again, ultimately, what I've looked at is, and what we look at is like, what are the things that people are currently doing that work, but are
Mhm.
tedious, and then how can you add some fuel so that and then build upon it. So, but no, it's a great. I don't want to call it a trick. I'll call it a strategy or tactic that I haven't seen brands
I'm
do.
fine being called a trick. Settle
Yeah.
for
um, Anything else like that you've seen just really help with around retention, or even converting from a one time to a subscription?
I mean, honestly, some of the stuff that you were talking about kind of early on, like, um, doing post purchase, having some of the
Hmm.
plans, kind of even pre purchase, you're getting people involved cohorts. The other retention problems, they fall into different categories, right? So you have the retention problem of the involuntary churn, right? Which,
Hmm.
you know, a lot of these platforms, they don't even, you have to go, like, let's say you're on Braintree. You have to go to Braintree and request them to turn on their auto updater. And for anybody that
Right.
doesn't know what that is, right? Like, Great has this, I think, as normal functionality. It might add a fee to it, but they have the ability to go ahead and get new expiration dates.
Yep.
They have the ability to push something that, because they don't, the CVC push something that actually gets the bank to approve it without that. And they can do this, but you have to request it manually. And like, I would love to see a scenario where that doesn't happen. The way that you rebuild customers too, to try to do that involuntary churn, it's significant. Like, involuntary churn is a big problem. Like, it isn't always that the customer doesn't want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
Their credit card literally won't work, even if it's a functional, right?
Yeah.
And they signed up for this. So that's one issue that I think almost everybody has to think about in subscription. They have to think about, how am I mitigating my involuntary churn? The second part of that, obviously, we talked a little bit about the prepaid plans. Truth is like, a lot of these products, they essentially have a window, right? And by window, I mean, let's say I launch a product and it's shitty, right? That product category or that core product might only start, say, like 6-month retention. If I really, really optimize it without prepaid plans, I might get it right.
Hmm.
There's no way I'm getting it. There is a place where the market just says, no, this is exactly where your problem is, right? So there's things that you can do, like the indoctrination and different things that actually increase retention. I mean, even stupid stuff like little surprises in each box can actually
Hmm.
make a difference too. You know, increasing people's consumption. I believe Patrick Campbell, the guy over at
Yep.
Profit Well, he has great data on actually add-ons actually increase retention. So there's great data there. Um, and then there are things like cancellation, right? So there's actually a couple things that's definitely in the portal that are done by some of your competitors very poorly. Simple, um, just simple stuff. Like, if I'm ordering, you know, um, a necessity, right? I should be able to go in there and switch the date, right? In certain cases, like certain platforms, they allow skips, right? Now, skips can also be a problem because you have something called ghost churn.
Hmm.
But, the ability to have flexibility on your subscription can actually increase retention and lifetime value. Um, the other thing too is cancellation flow. Not gonna lie. Cancellation flow isn't gonna be a massive game changer, but you can literally recover somewhere between about 5 to 15% that are about to cancel. It's very hard to stop those people once they commit it. But like, you look at Hulu, you look at all these guys, they have downgrade sales, they have other things that they can do. Hey, with your next box, I'm not offering you, we're going to give you a bonus, right? If you stick with us, we're going to give you a bonus here, right?
Hmm.
There are things that you can go ahead and do to try to retain that customer. But, it's a lot of those things are just like turning knobs. And I'm not even going to lie. I think at some point, because of how efficient everybody's becoming, that is going to become the cost of admission, right? But you need to do all those things anyways. The prepaid plans, having flexibility in your subscription, that's where these subscriptions are winning.
It's interesting because that just got me thinking around, like with some of the brands that like and operators I've spoken with, a lot of them try to make cancellation really difficult. To the point where, I sometimes feel like I'm a therapist between the consumer and the operator because it's kind of oftentimes evidence is anecdotal, but you were talking like flexibility around a subscription.
Yep.
That flexibility scares a lot of operators because they're like, I want to optimize for people going into a subscription and I want to make it difficult for the consumer to get out. And then, they're just looking at math. And then you're trying to sort of say, well, tr- like I, I can generally speak anecdotally, but just even as a consumer, this goes back to just thinking about the world, I guess, as a consumer, you're like, I don't want to work with brands that make it super difficult like that. You've lost goodwill. And I don't know if you have tested any of this or if you have actual like numbers to back up that flexibility improves retention.
I'll I'll tell you this, and then this is more anecdotal, but based on a ton of experience, right?
Yeah.
I've been that person before who was scared of, losing a subscriber by even sending an email, right?
Right.
Or somebody that wants to make it difficult. Here's the deal. A lot of brands that don't focus on doing well by their customers, they have a short shelf life. And I'm
Mhm.
just going to be honest, because ultimately we see brands that don't focus on their customer, and sure, they might get millions of customers, but eventually it's going to get so hard to get people. Whereas
Mhm.
we have certain brands in our portfolio that like they have like 30 some percent of their customers coming from referral, right? This one brand, I'm not going to mention them because it's so good, but like they have an NPS that's higher than Tesla. But when everybody still like Tesla, but like, you know, they they have an NPS that's that high, and so like there's this massive forward, and that creates an engine. Whereas like if you are in this scenario, like my goal is to extract as much value from my customer as possible.
Mhm.
Somebody else is going to eat that customer is going to go to somebody else, right? Because lifetime value matters, referrals matter. These are the things that keep you alive. Otherwise, you end up in this like hamster wheel of basically chasing your churn with your new acquisition. And I remember my old business partner, um, he's the co-founder of Ecommerce, and like he used to joke about Facebook being terrible, right? It's like
Mhm.
initially you're like, holy crap, this is amazing. But this thing is just giving, I put money in, post money out, and at some point, heroin kills you.
Mhm.
Because the truth is like ultimately, and by the way, like, a lot of these brands, like when they first start on like Facebook, they have probably like a 2 year honeymoon where like acquisition cost is low, but most of those grow. And they don't really think about that. And by the way, look at the public comps. This is very true. Unless you do some repositioning, unless you launch new products, unless you figure out new LTV. The reason that happens most of the time, in my opinion, is because competitors come into the market. The more
Mhm.
competitors come into the market, the harder it is to acquire things, right? Like if you were in the keto food space and you clicked on an ad, you'd see 5 other competitors, right? Those guys were making a lot more money when there was only one or two, right?
Yeah.
And so like that is happens to these brands. So like, yes, you can go ahead and make it super difficult for your customers to go ahead and cancel. But I will tell you that is a good 2, 3, maybe 4 year plan. It's not a long term. It's
Yep.
going to kill your business. And by the way, like I'm not going to get into legality, but I'll also say like sometimes I do take risks, especially up front. Like I'm less about like, keeping things fully buttoned up and testing up front, but like California is getting very serious about this stuff. And I can tell you personally, brands that I know that have had for money in California for not making it easy, for not allowing the same method of sign up and ease in the cancellation. Those things happen. And by the way, like that's money that you got to pay and it's not tax deductible.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I mean, that's one of the, again, anecdotally, it's as more and more brands are offering subscriptions as a revenue model. We'll just call it a revenue
Mhm.
model from now on. Um, part of it's also much easier for people to cancel, or even maybe the risk of someone canceling's even greater, because once someone cancels, there's like 5 different alternatives for them to subscribe to. And not necessarily
Mhm.
even in your category, but let's assume most people, like the last stat I saw was the average household in the US spends about $200 a month in subscriptions, in e-commerce subscriptions. Um, that's if the average order value is like $40, that's maybe five thing, three things realistically. So I think 200
Yep.
sounds like on the high end to me, but my guess is most people will subscribe to maybe three things at most. And then they'll like
200
swap
sounds
out.
low to me by subscribing to a bunch of SaaS.
Right. Well, again, I'm talking about physical e-com. Yeah, I have like a million SaaS subscriptions, but
Yeah,
most of
this is
those are like,
toy about the side.
yeah, well, exactly. You're like, this will make me 10 times faster. Um, no, and I love I call it hiring software to do the job.
Yeah.
If it cuts out needless work, but I think, yeah, as the market for subscription has grown, it's also kind of cannibalized itself, because when everyone's offering a subscription, well, if everyone's asking me to subscribe, I'm going to be very selective, or I'm going to default to no.
Yep.
Um, which I guess then the job becomes, as you were sort of saying, like, do a good job of whether or not someone starts out as a subscriber or not, make it easy for them in flow, or in cycle to upgrade.
Yep. And by the way, again, back to the revenue model, like th- you don't have to necessarily force this revenue model. There are good reasons to do it in certification. I think it's one of the easiest ways to cash flow a business, right?
Hmm.
But like, we've seen brands where like, yes, the core business on D2C is subscription, but like they might go ahead and create a one-off product for ends, might create a
Hmm.
one-off product for Target. That strategy works too. Don't just think about revenue as subscription as business. Think of it as
Hmm. One thing you mentioned earlier that I was thinking about, which was like talking about people skip, which I think you referred to as a ghost cancellation. And that's actually one of the interesting things. Like, um, we've actually spoken to a lot of brands, and I've asked them, like, do you know people who consistently skip? And are you segmenting those people? And then finding out why they consistently skipping, but also making sure that you're recognizing they're not an active subscriber, or they're a churn risk, and treating them differently, or, targeting them and offering them a free gift when they like renew, or, or doing customer development and just trying to understand why. Cause I'm not familiar with any other platform, um, that lets you, like, I think even, Recharge will tell you in aggregate how many people are skipping, but you can't actually go in and isolate, in a meaningful way. Here are the people who've skipped at least X number of times, and then segment them.
are you trying to say that they have bad analytics?
Can neither confirm nor deny. Um, but it is I was just thinking, it's like, it is one of those things where this idea of being able to provide more segmentation, I think as a marketer, like, are there certain things that you are like, why can't I just get this data out of the platform about my customer? Cause, um, you would treat those customers differently. And I think skipping is one example,
Yep.
pausing would be another one. I don't know if there's any other behaviors that you look at where, like, if someone's doing this, I would actually want to be able to sort of segment them, or communicate with them differently.
Yeah. So, I mean, on that granular level, like the nuts and bolts, I don't touch it as much. But what I will
Hmm.
tell you is I do remember some of the stuff missing, and I know sometimes I get manual, right? So,
Uh-huh.
it's some of the stuff. I mean, you're right about the skips and the ghost churn. There's nothing there. I think there's a lot of opportunity when you can slice data, right? And I don't hold a lot of these big platforms having good slice data. And what I mean by that is I love to see what retention is based on a Q. I
Hmm.
love to see retention based on a certain month that somebody was on, right? And I'd like to be able to plot those against each other. I'd like to be able to see what the retention is when somebody uses a gift card. Heck, I even want to see what the retention looks like on the type of payment method, right?
Hmm.
But it'd be cool to see, like, Stripe. I think Stripe has Stripe Radar. You can type in some
Hmm.
of that data and it'll pump it out. But you got to know, like, somewhat covering SQL type syntax. But like, that's the type of data that I think is really valuable, right? So when you're doing planning, you're doing predictions, like almost all subscription businesses have higher churn after November, December, especially if they have a peak, right? That's something that you could know from testing standpoint. A lot of subscriptions, they over discount. You need to look at what your incremental loss is compared to your incremental gain when you do that, right? So like, again, going back to like Patrick Campbell and some of the data that he's pulled across subscriptions, I believe he identified 30% discount. You typically start to see much higher amount of churn, sometimes double the churn in the first 2 months, right? When that happens, your difference between CAC to LTV might not be as good as what you think it is, right? So like, you want to find a good balance there. I mean, for the most part, we found like a new acquisition, 25% off works pretty well, but like there's other things too that you can do as offers, right? I'm going to give away this free thing on top of it, this free thing. There are things that you can do to incentivize that offer that might not have that same level of churn. But that's the main thing. I think, this is a game of lifetime. It is a game of how much does it cost me to acquire a customer? How much money am I making on this customer overall? And in order to do that, you need to focus on the churn. And the
Hmm.
only way to figure out how to improve that is being able to break this down individually. Also, we've done some crazy stuff where like, I don't recall how we necessarily the holdout, but like we might send like something different in like a box compared to other people and we frack them,
Track.
right?
Yeah.
And so like, hey, I'm going to add an insert to this one and I want to see how this insert impacts this person over the next 3 months, right? By the way, you can go longer, but candidly, we like to make decisions as quickly as possible, right? But you can see that data. And so that's the main thing. I just don't think the current platforms, a lot of them out there have really good ability to slice that data. And that's what's important. I mean, I'll take a bigger lifetime value any day.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think some of the slicing you're talking about, I have to take a look to see if Peel supports that. Because I'd say of the sophistication of like analytics tools, I know Peel does a fair amount of you can plot like first order SKU or first order product, and you can look at retention, I believe, and compare retention and LTV based off of the first product that they purchased. Um, but no, I'm curious. I don't know. Have you used Peel at all yourself?
No, I know some people that have. I mean, I
Yeah.
know in Triple Whale, like you can see by product name, but that's not,
Hmm.
I want to see by month. I want to be able to do some tests. I want to be able to see, was it the gift card discount, things like
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. All that makes sense. Um, well, hey man, I don't know if there was anything else. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I think one of the questions I like to ask is like, what's your big ask for everyone listening? Like, is there one thing that would transform your life or your business that if you had an
that.
opportunity, just put it out in front of in the ether? This is your opportunity.
I don't know about trans, but I would really appreciate, anybody's out there you see and you're looking to upgrade your agency, come check us out at sweatpantsagency.com. We're a kid, not kidding. Um, we do paid media. We do email marketing. We're pretty good at what we do. And then also, I like to shit post and talk trash on Twitter. So come follow me at, the Eric Carlson, or yeah, the Eric. And, there's no .com now.
Sorry, we'll put a link in the show notes to both your
Yeah.
agency as well as your Twitter. And as I was saying, like I would say Eric's one of the more amusing people on Twitter, and the threads that you were sharing, even around like not even about e-commerce. I think one that I was reading about the other day was you're talking about like, things that parents don't teach kids, or that we as a culture don't teach kids. So,
Yep.
say there's a lot of interesting nuggets and thoughtfulness there. So I appreciate that in between the shit posts.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Ben.